3 News Now this week.
We have an update for you now on a 3 News Now investigator story we first reported last week involving a daycare company in Metro Omaha that DHHS has been investigating. Omaha police have confirmed to 3 News Now that one of the owners and 2 former employees at Rosewood Academy have been cited for child abuse. Now, last week we reported the daycare had signed documents on 3 different occasions with DHHS agreeing 3 different people were not allowed to be alone with childcare children until an investigation was complete. One of those agreements involved the owner, Carl Hansen, which was signed back in February. In January, a similar agreement was signed involving Sage Bardo, who police say is a former employee. OPD emailed us tonight saying both have been cited for child abuse. Now, we asked OPD for the name of the 3rd person cited and are waiting to hear back. Earlier this week, we asked OPD for a copy of the police report involving their investigation. The department denied this request, stating it was an ongoing investigation, but did confirm the department's Special Victims Unit was handling the case. Now, you can look at some of the other concerns Nebraska DHHS has mentioned in past reports by going to our webpage, 3newsnow.com.
This happens all the time.
Luis Lorenzo came to the United States from Guatemala when he was 8 years old. As an adult, he did have several criminal charges on his record, but all except some minor infractions were later dismissed.
His family fled because they had political ties to opposition parties to the current government at the time, and even up to this day, up until very recently, he's had cousins and uncles who were murdered, who were shot, who were assaulted, who had to flee to the U.S. So we're going back decades that his family has been targeted for their political affiliations and for their family ties.
The charge against him that was not dropped was called alien in possession of a firearm. He was accused of trying to sell a gun at a pawn shop. It is a federal offense for a person who is not a citizen of the United States to be in possession of a firearm. Because of this charge, he was in the deportation process.
So that was our argument to the judge, is that he's going to suffer the same fate if he goes back there. This is not something that occurred 30 years ago and stopped. These are ongoing issues. And you combine that with the fact that the Guatemalan government is notorious for not only being corrupt, but also sometimes involved in a lot of crime down there, and certainly not able to prevent harm to him. And he very succinctly told the judge that he would be killed if she sent him back there.
He didn't even make it 6 months, and he was shot and killed in front of the same house. That we told her it would be in.
During his deportation hearing, the attorney provided hundreds of documents to prove his life would be in danger if he were to return.
If we can save one family and change one judge's mind, just to listen when these people are telling you. I understand that it's a court system and they feel like they hear excuses all the time. But when somebody puts something in front of you in black and white, don't close your eyes. Don't close your ears. Have a heart.
After Lorenzo was deported, he sought help from the Guatemalan police.
He went to the police multiple times to report these threats to his life. And yet, instead of helping him, they asked for money. And, whether that was for protection or not, I mean, clearly, if it was for protection, it didn't work out because he wasn't protected. He was murdered.
Lorenzo's wife and children are American-born citizens, and the rest of his family have already received their citizenship.
My husband's papers were in process. We were doing things the right way. His just took a little bit longer because when his came due, we just had our first child, and people don't understand how expensive it is.
His wife, Lacey Lorenzo, is disappointed in the system. She told me if the judge kept him in holding, he would still be alive today.
Are they going to send me in a letter in the mail and tell me that they granted his papers now? Now he's a citizen? No, they're not, because he'll never make it to that interview. Then with the virus in process, it just takes longer. His paperwork has been in process since June 8th of 2019, and he hasn't even received a first interview.
She hopes that by sharing their story, another family can be saved from the pain she is currently feeling.
I have 2 babies that will never have a dad. I have a little girl that will never have her dad walk her down the aisle, that will never be there for when they graduate.
Ariana Martinez, 3 News Now.
The current battle the family is facing is trying to bring Luis Lorenzo's body back to the U.S. to be buried.
As we continue to highlight women-owned businesses, tonight I introduce you to an Omaha herbalist who has been selling tea since 2016. Because of the pandemic, she had to pivot on her plans to open a brick-and-mortar store.
After she finalized a business partnership in June 2020, Andrea Loss and her partner Sarah Kluth realized the pandemic was not going to allow them to operate as they originally planned. So they continued sales online and started meeting with customers virtually and waited to open the shop.
We were looking at our sales, we're looking at our overall business saying, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to not only stay a business today, but follow that growth trajectory that we wanted, that we do long for with Artemis.
With a lot of hard work and the support from the community, the two women recently opened their flagship store in the Blackstone district.
I really don't know how we would be growing and thriving at the rate that we are right now if it were not for this tremendous support by the female community here in Omaha. But one thing that we do definitely want folks to know is that, Artemis is very much a brand that exists for everyone.
Loss told me the store exists to be a brand of empowerment for everyone. Even though they exhibit powerful, healthy, feminine vibes, ultimately, they want men to feel welcomed and empowered by their teas and brand as well.
Us, just like in nature, in the plants that we use and in the plants that we blend with and the plants that we drink, we truly feel that embodying all of those energies and all of the complexities of all of the people out there is part of what makes the identity of the company.
For them, it's more than just selling tea, but really connecting people with different plants and teaching them the health benefits from drinking special tea.
We blend traditional herbalism with progressive tea culture in a very unique way. All of our teas are organic. They're all unique blends formulated by us and blended by hand. Everything is blended by hand. We strive very hard to source as many of our botanicals from local growers as possible.
Trying to grow a company during a pandemic was a challenge, but what they have seen is that the support from other business owners never stopped. For more information on how to find Artemis teas and botanicals, you can visit our website, 3newsnow.com.
An incident in which a Bellevue resident had to euthanize her dog led Councilmember Thomas Burns to introduce an ordinance that he says would prevent future attacks.
If you own a dog that is under the classification of a bully breed, so that breaks down into 3 different breeds, then you would be required to have them muzzled, and also we have the leash, which is about a 6-foot minimum or maximum.
American Pit Bull Terriers, American Staffordshire Terriers, and Staffordshire Bull Terriers are considered bully breeds. Veterinary technician Lindsay Harden says those dogs have been bred to have tenacious tendencies, but it happens with all dogs.
I very, very rarely had aggression from a pit bull. But there were lots of other breeds that I would very frequently be leery of going into a room to grab them because they were a lot more likely to show me aggression.
While Harden says smaller dogs can also show those tendencies, Burns says it's about the severity of a possible attack.
I really think, it's just good to have a preventative measure and to just take precaution so that we don't have an attack.
Some Bellevue residents have criticized the ordinance, saying muzzles should be required on a case-by-case basis, and it shouldn't be breed-specific. Others say pit bulls can cause a lot of harm. Harden says muzzles can make a sweet dog look more aggressive than it actually is.
I don't think it's something that should be used across the board partly because it's not a healthy thing to teach the dog, to have to be muzzled all the time.
Under the ordinance, owners can register under the Breed Ambassador program as a way to opt out of the requirements. In Bellevue, Alyssa Curtis, 3 News Now.
It was a situation downtown at the Doubletree by Hilton Hotel on 17th and Capitol Streets. Now, according to Sergeant Menning with Omaha Police Department, there was a fire to an underground power transformer in the sidewalk just outside the hotel. The fire is now out. This is video of the thick smoke that started coming out of the building right after 8 p.m. Those that live in the area explained it as loud banging, almost like metal garage doors. Let's listen. Yeah, if you could have heard that there. Menning tweeted out just before 8:30 tonight that OPPD was en route to the scene and traffic signals could be affected. Our crews were there and spoke with people who were inside the building when the fire broke out and had to evacuate quickly.
I was just with my family. We were in our room on the 8th floor, and we were relaxing, and then we hear a loud explosion that shakes the building up a bit, and we look down out of our windows, and we see smoke coming out of the sewer vents directly below us.
There were no injuries and no damage to the building. Everyone that was evacuated was allowed to return inside around 9 p.m. Omaha and Lincoln voted this week in city elections, and the rest of the state took a break from voting.
Critics say these off-year elections attract fewer voters and waste taxpayer money, but supporters say they keep city elections from developing into a partisan battle.
3 News Now investigator Aaron Sanderford explores why Omaha and Lincoln go their own way and what it could be costing you and some candidates.
Because he or she
and in my second term, I will cut middle-class taxes.
5 months after a presidential election that wore out voters in both parties. Omaha voters on Tuesday chose their candidates for mayor and city council. Lincoln also voted in local races. But separate city elections don't come cheap. Omaha will spend $800,000 to $1 million on city elections this year. And Lincoln will spend another $200,000 to $350,000. But because local elections lack the draw of races for president or governor, people typically get a city government that is picked by less than a third of registered voters. More than twice that many Nebraska voters cast ballots in the 2020 presidential election. So why do Omaha and Lincoln pay more to get less? And should they switch? We asked the state's chief election officer that question.
The theory was that it would enhance turnout for these local elections. It is not proved out. It does not have that effect. So I think that the time has come to rethink that.
Nebraska Secretary of State Bob Evnen says every other Nebraska city saves thousands by holding local elections during statewide elections. Douglas County Election Commissioner Brian Cruz and Lancaster County's Dave Shively say the cities could save money by combining elections.
There's some polling places that we pay a nominal fee to, like churches and other private businesses like that. Then, of course, our staff time, any overtime we might incur. And then you have the physical part of it, I guess you might say, the ballots, the envelopes, the return envelopes.
For us, it's only a 4-week turnaround from our primary general. In Omaha, it's a 5-week turnaround. But that's really very tight turnaround for us to close one election out and get the other one started and get ballots out for early voting and everything else.
There are 2 ways to change the timing of Omaha and Lincoln city elections. The first is by changing city charter, which is like a local constitution. Omaha Mayor Jean Stothert proposed moving city elections during the charter convention in 2013, shortly after she took office as mayor.
I count pennies. I mean, I manage, like I said, $1 billion all-fund budget. And I keep track of little expenses as well as big expenses. And $1 million is $1 million. It's a lot of money. And if we can save $1 million and we could use $1 million on something else, I think that that's an efficient way to run city government.
Stothert says she aims to try again if she is reelected. The next chance is 2023. City Councilman Chris Jerem was part of the City Council opposition in 2013 and says the City Council should fight her again. He argues that separate city elections help city races and city issues stand out.
If they make this change, it's driven by one thing: try to get the parties into the city election where your candidates have to try to appeal through offering the red meat that the extreme bases of each party who vote in primaries want to hear.
Though Stothert says she would prefer the city make a change on its own, the other option is state law. State Senator Justin Wayne of Omaha says he will propose a bill next session to move city elections.
I don't agree with the way they do it. I think it should be held on presidential years. I think like we do our school boards, if you talk about local elections, you can't get more local than your school board who is educating your kids. And I think those are just fine. Those aren't lost in the presidential debate.
Wayne chairs the legislature's Urban Affairs Committee.
I think it creates a problem for those who are fatigued from the presidential election. They're tired of hearing about politics, and then they have to turn around within 2 months and re-engage in politics at the local level.
The history of Omaha holding elections in odd-numbered years after major elections might well be an accident of fate.
And what we're looking for is Article 8.
3 News Now investigators dug into decades-old records with City Clerk Elizabeth Butler.
Yeah, man.
Those basement archives show the city's switch to a strong mayor style of governance in the mid-1950s happened when an election was already planned for spring of 1957. Before that change, the city held elections every 3 years, not 4. Had they waited one more cycle, Omaha would have been electing mayors in the same years as Nebraska governors, but in the spring.
Nobody really benefits from the way that the system as it's set up now. One could hypothesize that people who benefit from low turnout elections benefit from it, but is that really what we're looking for? I don't think so.
Former mayoral candidate DeJuan Lamont Hayes has a unique perspective on the oddities of Omaha city elections. He just missed making the primary ballot this spring, falling short of the city's signature requirement, a quirk that only Lincoln shares for city elections. He and others we spoke to would like to address that issue too, but Hayes says he wants the city to address election timing first.
The timing shows that there is a significant disconnect between the city of Omaha's communication and the county with its constituencies. And it also shows that only a very small percentage of the city actually gets to dictate who is our leadership. And that's a major issue.
Until something changes, the only lever voters have to pull is the one waiting during Omaha's general election on May 11th and Lincoln's on May 4th. I'm Aaron Sandiford, 3 News Now.
Election experts say the biggest drop-off in turnout between regular elections and city elections occurs in older, more diverse parts of Omaha. Local Republicans tend to vote at higher rates in city elections than Democrats.
It doesn't make any sense. We don't need this legislation. People are fine with what we had.
Democrat Charlie McConkey is outraged at this legislation that lacks what he calls common sense.
There's got to be, you can drive a car, but you have to have a license. There's some people that shouldn't be behind the wheel. That's the way I look at it. There's some, you got to pass a test, and there's certain people that shouldn't be possessing weapons.
Republican Brent Segrist admits there are public safety concerns since people will be able to buy handguns from private sources. But the legislation did strengthen penalties for sellers.
If you sold a gun to somebody who used it in commission of a crime or whatever, the penalty for you as the seller becomes a Class D felony, which means that you would forfeit your right to own guns.
The bill would also allow people to carry a gun in public places without a permit or previous training. Segrist doesn't believe the bill will be a threat to public safety. The bigger issue, he says, is mental health.
Bad people get guns illegally, and then people that are mentally unstable for whatever reason can buy guns with a background check and a permit. So it's all those acts of violence are extremely unfortunate, obviously, but this bill I don't think is going to have a big impact on that.
One of the owners of this gun shop, Red Flag Armory, says they're already making preparations for July 1st.
We placed a large order. We're going to at least try to have anywhere between 10 to maybe 40 handguns just available for July 1st.
Co-owner Matthew Vincent opened this shop during the pandemic and says sales are always increasing month to month. Vincent expects business to boom.
When it comes to just for us, I think sales will maybe increase anywhere between 20 to 50%.
Still, Iowans remain polarized. College student Jacob Ludwig worries about the world his generation is stepping into.
I think we've seen that the gun policies that we've had for the last 20 or 30 years have not done enough to keep us safe. And I think this is moving in the exact opposite direction of where we need to be headed.
Reporting in Council Bluffs, Isabella Basco, 3 News Now.